Okay, hi everybody. It's Dallas here at Commotion Sheet Metal. By popular demand, I'm making a video for our YouTube channel, and this video is for the grinding and polishing and graining of a outside corner weld on some 16 gauge stainless steel. This is kind of a full meal deal video rather than just a quick recap. A lot of students have asked to have this video as an extra level of instruction for when we go to do our third year barbecues. So yeah, I want to talk about my methods of doing this. As many of you know, I've specialized in custom fabrication, so this is quite in my wheelhouse. Certainly not the best in the world, but certainly not crappy at it. So here we go. What's important to realize here that a lot of people don't realize is how we want to ultimately have this weld look. So I have an outside corner weld, 90 degrees. When I weld this, my method is with my torch. I'll come in there with my torch and, oh, sorry about the camera there. Come in there with my torch, and I actually rest my cup a little bit when I weld, and there's an advantage and a disadvantage to it. The advantage is I'm quite stable. Like, I'm not all shaking around in the middle of nowhere. The disadvantage is the ceramic kind of gets a little sticky on the cooling bead behind the argon, so it kind of like grabs a bit as you're going. So it's a really delicate touch. But when I'm welding this, as many of you know, I kind of weave back and forth. I give a little wiggle as I go down, and I do it for a couple of reasons. I do it mainly because I want a nice radius on my bead, and I want a nice radius on that bead because I'm going to grind that and shape that to create an illusion. And the illusion I'm creating is that is actually bent. So in other words, I'm trying to match an outside bend radius. Sample of one here. So I'm trying to match that outside bend radius with my weld. We get pretty close. I mean, the heavier the gauge, this is 16 gauge. If I go to a 14 gauge, I can get really close to that outside bend radius, but yeah, we get her as close as we can. Okay. So doing that, it can go wrong really fast, as we know with stainless steel. We don't want to overheat it. We want to keep it cool. We know it oil cans really bad. Its thermal expansion rate, like it's pretty wild stuff. We also know if we follow the rules with our stainless steel, we'll have a good stainless day, not a bad stainless day. So my first step on this is I hit this with an 80 grit sanding pad, and I got my angle grinder here, it's 4.5 inch. I've used lots of abrasives, but this happens to be a Walter 80 grit, and it's one of the ceramic ones, so the actual abrasive stuff on there is ceramic, and it tends to last a really long time. Now, being a fairly, like I've used just the edge of this in a previous demo, being a fairly new pad, it's quite aggressive, and I find after I use an 80 grit for a while, it kind of wears down to 120 or so. That being said, I know if I have a brand new 80 with my years of doing this, I know I'm not going to grind through this really fast, but for you that have never maybe done this before, you can grind right through your material pretty quick. So sometimes what I do is suggest to apprentices to go and get a more worn out 80 grit pad. And yeah, it puts a little more heat in the material, but it gives you a lot more time to kind of go back and forth and shape this without removing too much of the material. Okay. So a couple things before I go to grind on this. I want to talk about my travel speed. So well, let's turn that so the light gets it. Okay. So earlier today, don't mind the plug weld, that was a previous demo of what not to do. Earlier today I showed my group the difference between traveling slow with a sanding pad or a blend X or polishing pad, and then traveling fast. And we can see that we have striations here that are really far apart because I moved really quick, And then we have striations here that are really close together and really quite smooth. I can almost dig my fingernail into those, where those ones are really smooth. So how fast we move is very, very important. Okay. So when I'm going to start shaping this outside corner, it's a habit of a lot of people to come into this thing and hit it with the edge of the pad. And that's fine and dandy, and I mean, go for it. However, what can happen, and I'll make a little drawing here, is I kind of describe it as a bunch of peaks and valleys on a mountain range, okay? So at the tops of the mountains, then we have the valleys. So this is exaggerated, but this is a lot like, it's a lot like your weld, okay? So even though my weld, my bead's really small, and we didn't use any filler, this was welded autogenously, even though it's quite small, there is still little ripples in the weld, especially when we weave. So if I go and I take that sanding pad and I go right on edge, we can imagine if I went on edge with the mountain range, it's just gonna follow up and down and up and down, right? It's just gonna go up and down as I make my pass. So what's bad about that is if I do that, I end up with something, this is what I ground earlier, and let's see if I can zoom in on that for you. So we can see how I've really kind of dug away. You can see it's kind of fallen into all those valleys, and it doesn't really look that well or that good. This is not unsavable, but it's kind of the wrong technique in my opinion. What we should be using is not the edge of the pad. Let's zoom back out for a sec. When we're grinding with this, what we should be using is our cord length straight across, okay? And we should not be holding the pad on edge. No, we should actually be, let's just use one of the lines for reference here, we should be using that cord length to keep this pad flat. If we keep the pad flat, we're gonna hit all the peaks of the mountains first and slowly grind those away and slowly reach the valleys and then grind no further than the valleys. Hope you're following. So my other side here, I did in that fashion. I'm gonna do it on camera in just a second here. This is the other side of my piece I did in my demo today. And we can see that that weld profile is much cleaner and much tighter, okay, versus this one here, which is much more coarse, and we can see there's highs and low spots if we catch that in the light just right. These little details really make a difference, okay? So my method here, and I'm gonna do a pass, is I'm gonna take my pad and I'm gonna hold it flat on the cord. Now oftentimes we're actually grinding in this orientation, where we have that up like this, okay? And what I'm looking for is that angle, let's hold my pad up, my angle in here, in there, that should be about 45 degrees. So I have 45 here, I have 45 here, okay? I'm gonna hit the very outer edge of that weld first, and I'm gonna do that before I start moving this thing around, okay? The other thing is, we don't wanna grind too far into the good number 4. In fact, we can see my heat affected zone, that heat tint. Let's zoom in just a little bit. So my heat tint there, I only actually want to be knocking off like that little ripple of my weld. That's it. I don't really want to be grinding at all into here if I can avoid it. Sometimes we slip, sometimes there's an accident, whatever. We can deal with that down the road, but the idea is we don't want to grind that far into it, okay? So let's zoom out a bit. So I'm going to do a pass here, and I'm going to go back and forth, and then I'm going to start to change my angle a little bit, okay? So I did my pass across my mountain range, and as we can see, I have a solid silver line all the way down the longitudinal seam. If we look in, let's see if I can, yeah. If we look here, zoom in. If I zoom in, let's focus. Can you focus? Focus. It's like I'm talking to my dog. Focus. We can just a little closer maybe. Get you to focus up. We can just barely see a little bit of my weld left. You see my weld, a little ripple there? And then on top we can see that silver streak that I just ground. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my angle a little bit. Okay? So I went from where I had a 45 in here, so now I'm gonna tilt up slightly. Now I don't wanna go so far up that I actually grind into here. I wanna leave maybe 5 degrees, 10 degrees maybe, so I don't actually scar this. When I grind this side, I like to use the edge of the pad, but you risk slipping and grinding down here. Sometimes for safety, it's better to maybe use this side of the pad and roll down, but you also risk going too far down and then grinding into this. So it's this dance of kind of back and forth. Okay, so let's finish profiling this. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So I went from like my 45 to about, up maybe a 5 or 10 degree angle, my acute angle between my finger and the sheet metal, and the same on this side, and I've knocked and profiled that, okay? If I move really fast, I'm gonna have really deep, far apart scratches. I don't want those. I want really tight, close together scratches. That's the idea, okay? So my next step here, now this is my choice, and a lot of people do things different. I have my own favorite abrasives, and my next choice is going to be the Brown Blendex, okay? So the idea here, it's like, I don't know if you've ever done woodworking where you start at a certain grit, then you go to a finer grit, and a finer grit, and a finer grit, and what woodworkers do is they actually cross-hatch each time they sand to a new grit, and it helps you see the scratches from the previous grit, and you'll know when you have all of those scratches removed. So this is an operation of chasing scratches, okay? So the idea is that 80 creates 80 grit scratches, then your Blendex gets those scratches out. I have an extra step that I do. It's this wheel here. This one's called unitized. I've heard them called unified. And this is a magic wheel. They're very expensive. They're about 30 or 40 bucks a pop. And they're really cool because after I hit this with my Blendex, this will bring me past a number 4, somewhere between maybe a number 6 and number 8. Not quite mirror, but pretty close. And it makes it really easy to go back over top of this and regrain. You don't need this step. I've seen a lot of people just go to the Brown Blendex and straight to maybe a graining drum like this, or maybe some Scotch-Brite, some hand Scotch-Brite, okay? So my next step will be this pad here, okay? And in fact, what I'm gonna do is, I'm not gonna use this piece because I realized just now that I had my grain going in the same direction on both. And I'm actually gonna switch to the piece I had earlier, okay? And much like the barbecue that we do, we have a grain going down this way and then opposing grain going down the longitudinal side of it. So that's an important thing I wanna talk about. Okay, so as I profile this, what I like to do is I'll take my pad and I'll use the cord length again, and I'll just kind of further shape that, just kind of get some of those previous scratches out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go against everything I just said, and I'm actually going to start to use this on edge. I can use a pad on edge after I've profiled this and make it flat. If I put a straight edge on there, like this, it's really flat. Like I don't have any highs and lows or peaks and valleys. So, I mean I do, it's just nothing the human eye can really catch or see. Okay, so remember these Brown Blendex, we need these on a variable speed grinder. I have my DeWalt here. I love this. It's brushless. It's got a brake. I turn it on. It stops instantly. It's really great. I have a range on the back here. So it goes from, zoom in for you. It goes from, stop wobbling, from 8,000 RPM all the way down to 1,800 RPM. These are really, really great. Particularly when we get to a larger diameter graining drum. Larger diameter graining drum, because it's a larger diameter, there's going to be more torque required to get this thing to spin around, or like rather there's more resistance against the motor in your grinder. So these grinders are designed for buffing and polishing, whereas these higher RPM grinders, those are designed for things like zip discs or maybe an abrasive like this that's rated for a higher RPM. I have hooked these up to variable speed boxes and used these drums, but it tends to bog these down. These are high RPM, low torque. These are high torque, low RPM. These are about $300. Get them at Princess Auto. Okay. Moving on. So what I'm going to do now is, like I said, I'm just going to grain back and forth on this. And that really smooths things out. It's almost to a point now. Let's see if I can get a good camera angle, a zoom in, closer to me. It's getting close to the point now where, there we go, where I'm not really seeing the scratches left from the 80 grit. If I'm making a dish pit, I'm doing some dish tabling, something commercial, I'm going to go get a graining drum, I'm going to grain right over that. In fact, sometimes I won't, if the weld's nice, I will just passivate the weld and call it a day. Just leave the weld if it's a pretty weld. Sometimes we have to create that illusion that it was bent, so really a time and a place. We could by all means take a graining drum, go over that, it would look pretty damn good. But we're building barbecues. Whoops, wrong way. We're building high-end things for level 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reintroduce some of this grain. And what I'm going to do is, we can see my number 4 is going up vertically away from me. On edge, I'm going to let this pad spin like this. On edge, I have in here from flat, I have about, I don't know, maybe a 15-degree angle, 15 to 30 degrees. And I'm going to bring that slowly all the way back, and it's going to put scratches in the direction of my grain. That's good. But I know what you're thinking, well, what happens when you get to this one here? Right, the grain's going the other way. Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to use that chord length again, and I'm going to go back and forth, getting the scratches to go down the longitudinal seam. All right, let's do it. Put that on my grinder. Again, variable speed. So I'm at, where am I? I'm at 2.5, so 2.5 on here. So I'm at about 4,000 RPM. Okay, so on edge. Change my angle a bit. I'm going nice and slow. Okay. So that's got that side taken care of, and if I can get the light just right, and I zoom in, if I can get it to focus on my hand, there we go. We can see now that I actually have lines, scratches going up and down away from me, kind of sort of matching the grain that's pre-existing. And also everybody, seeing as we're talking about my Lord and Savior number 4 grain, get it out of your brains that the human body is going to match this. This is done on a machine. You will never perfectly match a number 4 finish. You can't. You can get close, but you're always going to see some kind of a difference. You'll spend 5.5 hours standing in a corner, hunched over a sink, grinding it out. You'll think it looks perfect. You turn your counter 90 degrees, the light hits it different. Oh boy, scratch city. Okay? So we get this really close to the best of our ability, and we accept that we're never going to perfectly match that. So for my next stunt, we're almost there, almost to the grand finale. Next stunt, I'm going to hold this flat in the chord length, and I'm going to go back and forth and establish some scratches going down longitudinally. Okay, done. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's nice and smooth. I mean, the camera really doesn't do it justice. Real life does, but it's more the technique that you're gonna get out of this video. So that's really smooth. Looks a lot better than that crap down there. Ugh. Okay. So now I'm gonna show you that extra step, and that's my unified or unitize, this company calls it. And I'm gonna swap that wheel out. Plug that back in. All right. So these ones you can use at 10,000 RPM. So that's great. And I'm going to go over this the same way I just did with my Blendex pad. Same exact way. And I'm going to get those micro scratches from the Blendex pad out. Excuse me. One thing I always point out too is you'll never see me standing with a grinder grinding like this. Okay, I always move with the grinder. I'm always looking down at it. I might have it locked against my body so it's sturdy. I'm always moving with it with my body rather than my arms. Back and forth like that, forward and back. No, forward and back like this. So that's things. I never realized I did that until I got this job, but here we are. So next, I'm going to go and take care of the top of this. Same idea, use the cord length of the pad. And we can see it actually leaves, and I'll zoom in. Hopefully the camera can do us some justice here. Focus. Maybe. You can see it, maybe in the light it'll catch it. It leaves us a really, it's hard to tell. Camera doesn't do it justice, but it leaves a very, very shiny finish. So in other words, it makes it really easy to establish a number 4 on top of that, because this has been buffed or polished past number 4. Okay. Notice on the bottom, my heat tint is gone, and that's because I let that abrasive hit it vertically. Where if you look at the top, my heat tint's still there. And I'm going to get that heat tint out with my graining drum. Nothing else, okay? So for this one, now I'm going to swap that out. Turn that off. Switch this over. Put my graining drum onto my variable speed grinder. I like these grinders. I'd never used the DeWalt. We just got a couple at the college, so been trying them out, and yeah, I'm quite pleased with them. And I'm going to put the RPMs way down on this. I'm going to be at 1800. I like a nice low RPM. I find it matches the grain better. Okay, so this is kind of a tricky one. So what I'm going to do is I might have to change the camera just a little bit here. But first I'm going to start with this top one. Okay. And I'm just going to quick grip this to the table so it doesn't move on me when we do my demo. Okay, and what I like to do is get myself into a position. I was sitting down for that, so it's, the end of the day and I'm lazy, but I'm going to get myself into a position where I can go straight down on this, and I might even change just a bit of the camera angle here so you can see me better. Okay, so I'm going to look straight down. I'm looking straight down on the wheel, and I'm going to move back and forth with my body. Okay? If I stand here and grain like this, like away from me, I can't tell if I'm kicking off one way or the other. But if I have that locked against my body and I'm looking straight down, I can go back and forth, and I kind of rock back and forth on my feet. Okay? And that's what I'm going to do here. little more. So take note that when I'm doing this, I'm moving really fast. I'm going back and forth, back and forth. If I go slow, I kind of wander a bit and my grain gets all wiggly. So you don't want to travel super slow like this. You want to keep moving, okay? I'm careful not to hit the raw edge. If after I have to grain to a raw edge, I might flip my grinder around and have it roll off the other side. Change the orientation here. So now my orientation, so I'm going to be doing, oh, excuse the glare. Now I'm doing the grain this way. So I did the grain up and down that way, as you can see. Looks pretty good, got the heat tint off. Now I'm going to do it the other way. Okay, clamp this down. The glare's not helping, so let's see if we can change that for you a little bit here. That's not so bad. Yeah, once I'm in the way. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to do now is, again, back and forth, but I don't want to grain too far into the actual number 4. I want to keep back a little bit. So I'm actually going to start back more where we initially started, where we were at 45, and I'm going to go back and forth, and as I go back and forth, I'm going to go slowly up. So back and forth, slowly up, back and forth, slowly up, back and forth, and I'm going to do that until I see the unified wheels marks go away. All right, so important to reiterate the, let's get old Dal Pal on the camera here. So important to, I got my big screen right there. So important to reiterate that the first few abrasives that we used, whether it be the sanding pad, the Blendex, or the unified wheel, it's important to know that really, like, the level of finesse, it's like we're not really pushing hard trying to grind away large amounts of material. No, we have a level of finesse where we're really just controlling the weight of the grinder and how much of that mass is touching our good material. Okay, so that's great for this 80 grit and this Blendex and the unified. However, you'll find that you do need to push a little bit with your graining drum. Okay. The reason I like the variable speed again is because it has the torque. When these are brand new, it's of a much larger diameter. It can be something maybe like that. This is part of a pneumatic Blendex drum. And when they get to that kind of diameter, can you see that? Oh yeah. When you get to that kind of diameter, it can really put a lot of excess load on the motor. Like, these are great because they're brushless, but you get to like an old, $90 Makita, you can start to get into a situation where you burn that motor out really quick. So, I don't know, it's pretty good. Let's see if the camera picks it up. Okay, I might have to zoom it back down to the bench, it won't focus properly. Okay, so I've grained along that edge. It looks not so bad. We can see the grain catching in the light there. It's okay, it's pretty close. And then if I go to this edge here, see if I can get the dust off and get that grain in the light, that's not so bad either, okay? Slow and steady wins the race. The last thing I want to point out, seeing as I have you here, is anytime we get to an outside corner, let's just use this for that'll work. Use this for an example. So I got an outside corner. Let's say I've welded that. Okay, now I'm going to grind and polish it. That outside corner, you can grind through that really, really fast. So I don't normally hit them with my 80, especially a brand new one. You'll just grind right through in a second. I'll wait to shape those corners with a Blendex. Kind of my personal preference. So what else? I think that pretty much covers most of it. There's lots of different abrasives out there. There's lots of different ways to do it. This is what I like. You don't have to use that unified wheel. It's an extra step. Like I said, I would not be using that for making a sloping dish tabling or something in the kitchen, making a hood. No. If I'm working on a high-end home, doing a countertop with ball-cornered sinks, integrated drain boards, whatever, that's the time and the place. So yeah, hope that helps. I'm going to upload this to our YouTube channel, and hopefully I don't have to edit this. Take care.